What's up everyone, 737D is here. We have our post-TI patch. And just in time because, well, the game really could use some change after TI, couldn't it? Let's start off quickly with the elephant in the room that we all gotta talk about. Stat items are finally nerfed. Now when I mean stat items, I mean Brazier, Wraithband, and Null Talisman have all seen their biggest compartment of why they were really broken nerfed, which is that they no longer double their values at 25 minutes and forward into the game. Now, if you've been with Dota for a while, you will know that this is a change that occurred, I would like to say, 4 or 5 years back. And the reason why they initially did this change anyway was that supports were having way too hard of a time staying kind of relevant in mid-late game. They basically would get there, not have a whole lot of items, and then they would die because anti-mates would laugh funny at them and they would just disappear. Valve added the double bonus as a way for particularly supports to benefit more from having rather cheap items go into their inventory and them kind of scaling a little bit better into the game. The problem, of course, if you watch TI is that everyone has been using Braziers predominantly as the main item to just get really, really far ahead. And what ended up happening was that way too many heroes were way too tanky. Doubly so if we look back on like what happened with these items was supports back then could not farm like at all. Nowadays you have a Tinker, you have a Spirit Breaker, you have even Warlock with his pool can just, farm. And back then you couldn't really do it, now you can. So it's not as important for supports nowadays to have this, let's just call it what it is, like this inflated mechanic to just get more stats than they really need. It's a really good change. It's the right step for the game, I think. And it nerfs both cores and supports just so they won't mass so many Braziers and stat items in general. Very nice to see. Best part about the patch by far is just that. Next up we have smaller nerfs, and they're actually surprisingly small in that Pipe and Guardian Greaves and Crimson Guard haven't seen too much. We have 1 second on Crimson and we have 2 seconds on Barrier Duration from Pipe of Insight, which isn't a whole lot. Total cost is slightly increased on Guardian Greaves because of Arcane Boots, which has seen a little bit of a nerf as well. But these are on average very mild changes, and I'm actually kind of surprised that they didn't see more. That might still happen in the next patch. We never know. That remains to be seen. We have Gleipnir, the item everyone probably hates. I was going to say love and hates. At this point, I think it's a straight up hate relationship. Gleipnir is largely seen as the most aggressive item of the patch, and it has seen a lot of changes to it. The two biggest nerfs here is not really the attack speed and even the health bonus either, or the damage bonus. I firmly believe it's Chain Lightning going down by 20, which is pretty big because you farm significantly less fast with it now, and adding an extra 300 recipe cost to Gleipnir is actually huge. So you now will achieve it kind of significantly less fast than before, which is a huge deal. This is one of their main ways of making these items less appealing to a lot of people, is that they add a recipe that has quite a high cost. That was one of the problems, for example, Radiance used to have, was that it didn't have Talisman of Evasion built into it. It was just a massive recipe, about 1,350. It felt awful. You would get Sacred Relic and then 1,350 gold would go nowhere. And that is the change that has happened a little bit to Gleipnir. And 300 gold, again, is a lot of money to add on to that. Pavis and Solar Crest have had their effectiveness reduced. The barrier is less strong, duration is decreased a bit, and the mana cost is more higher than before, really. And the same has appeared for Solar Crest. The barrier is less good, and the attack speed you get as a bonus is been decreased. Kind of expected a little bit more as well, maybe like a higher cost to the items, but it's a nerf, and we're still gonna see the item because it's still good, but it remains to be seen whether or not we will see a Solar Crest in every game like we would before. Now, this one actually has me a bit hyped and a bit surprised, and that's actually Spirit Vessel. It is one of the best ways to deal with tanky boy meta, or just heroes in general being way too tanky. And when you think about it, that's kind of what we've had this entire TI and the TI patch in general. Heroes have been way too tanky and way too hard to kill because of Brazier stacking and whatnot. And on top of nerfing Brazier completely, they also buffed 10% extra on Spirit Vessel, which I think is huge and it's really interesting. And I actually think that this change in general showcases that Valve realizes what the problem of the patch is, and they're taking steps in the right direction to fixing that. So it's very cool. I'm really stoked to see them do this. Now, next one here is Soul Release now always gains a charge when the owner dies. This one had me a bit confused when I read it initially because I thought, wait a moment, that's how it always worked. But no, what it said before was that when you are at 0 charges and you die, you get 1 charge. Now it's just if you die and you have a Spirit Vessel, you'll always gain a charge. So that's a buff, and it's an interesting one. So if you're a support with a hard game that isn't really using their Spirit Vessel charges, for an example, or if you're an Invoker, you're now going to get continuous charges, which is a pretty interesting thing. I quite like it. Now, as you would have expected, if we go down to the heroes, it's pretty much what you would have expected. All the top tier heroes have been nerfed in some way. Luna on the carry side, for example, has had a little bit of a nerf, and that's to be expected. She's a ranged core, ranged safe laner. All ranged safe laners have had their power kind of go down significantly. The biggest one, which is Wind Ranger, this is hardly surprising. She's had her whirlwind reduced quite significantly in that it's no longer as good as it used to be. The biggest one by far being that the cooldown has increased at the max level from 30 to 50, so that's a whopping 20-second increase on the cooldown. Now, the main reason why the dev team probably did this was that the pros were using focus fire way too much to just farm. Again, 30 seconds is not a lot of a cooldown to have on an ability this damn strong. So by nerfing it with 20 seconds, people are going to be a lot less likely to, you know, just spam it off cooldown to farm with it, because now you might not have it ready for a team fight, whereas before, 30 seconds is such a short amount of time, so it's a step in the right direction. And on top of that, we also have to remember that Wind Ranger is indeed a universal hero, which means that the nerf on stat items in general, again, Race Band, Null Talisman, Brazier, has really hurt her in particular. All universal heroes that were good before, Visage, Marcy, Wind Ranger, has suffered quite a lot from not being able to hold these items in their inventory for a prolonged amount of time, because they're no longer going to get a later boost of having these items. And yeah, that hurts them a lot because they are universal heroes. But it is as you expect. It's these top tier heroes that we're seeing way too much TI play. Again, Tusk as well has had a slight amount of nerf that predominantly have seen the biggest nerf going that way, with Wind Ranger, of course, being the biggest one. On that note, we have Muerta here, which is very interesting. She actually saw herself having a buff, which I didn't expect because she's part of the cool guys club in that she is a ranged safe laner, and those have been eating very well this patch after all. She's had her effectiveness increased by up from 6 to 8. And that's quite powerful because one of the key things about Muerta is that she gains charges as she is part of kills, and that is what allows her to really scale into the game really, really well. So having Pierce the Veil be a flat 8 as opposed to 6-7 in level 6 and 12 is actually huge, because now there's a bigger potential. You score those perma kills for the remainder of the game, which will really make you scale a lot better coming into the game. This also works really well with her when she has the facet for spawning with her Ofrenda and getting her ult for free. Now it's a flat 8 seconds. A flat 8-second ultimate at level 6 when you respawn is not a bad thing at all. So it's really interesting to see her get this buff, and we will probably start seeing her quite a bit more. Now, of interesting as well is that there has been some buffs towards melee heroes that we may or may not have expected. The biggest one here is actually two of them, is Lifestealer and Juggernaut. Let's go over Lifestealer here first. So Lifestealer has had his max life health steal increased and his health damage increased 1.5, 1.5 all the way up to 3, whereas it was 125 before and 275 before as well. So his feast is now considerably better than it was before. It's just some number changes, but this has basically given him about 2 to 5 to 3% higher win rate in pubs right now, which is kind of a big deal. Now, Juggernaut is also an interesting one in the fact that he has seen a marked increase in win rate as well. I think it's all the way up to 2.5/3% win rate as well. And that happens mostly because of Duelist. Yeah, the healing ward change is pretty decent, but nothing really too much to write home about. But bonus damage increased by 2 on his Duelist is actually huge. If you don't know how Duelist works, Juggernaut deals 12% more damage to targets that are facing him. Damage bonus always applies during Omnislash. Now, this is actually huge because that just sounds like, oh, he's fighting people and he has 2% more damage. Whoopie-doo. No, this is everything. Everything that faces Juggernaut now takes 2% more damage. So that means when you're laning and when you are farming neutrals, anyone facing you will take 2% more damage. So in a very roundabout way, unless people are actually running away from you, Juggernaut just had a 2% damage increase flatly. That's pretty good. And again, the fact that it is always active during his Omnislash is also a really, really good thing because he's all over the place when he does that. So Juggernaut has been eating really, really well here. Another interesting one that isn't noted as a carry, of course, is Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter has had his win rate also go up quite significantly, and it's because they rescaled Janata's damage, so it's now a lot better early, but it's a little bit worse. But this is also because, like, mostly you will not see people max Janata, you will see them max his Q, and just having one value point in Juggernaut and having it do more damage is actually significantly better than before. Now, he is a hero that I would argue that pros were sleeping on, albeit Pro Dota and Pop Dota are not, the same game at all. They're two separate games almost entirely. Bounty Hunter had a really high win rate before already in pubs. Now it's going to be even greater. Now, a prediction from me, albeit it doesn't show anywhere yet, is I actually believe there's potential that Phantom Lancer is going to make a bit of a comeback, because I think Illusionary Armaments getting this effects that potentially change the base damage now also affect base damage bonus provided provided by illusionary armaments has become a thing. So now when you have an item such as Vladimir's present on Phantom Lancer, you'll now do significantly more damage because it will be tied into his base damage, which will increase the damage of his illusions, which I think is really, really cool. On top of that, the bonus to base damage for illusions increased by 5% is also really big. It remains to be seen, but if we are entering a bit of a, dare I say, a new era for melee heroes, melee safe laners in particular, it wouldn't be unreasonable to think that Phantom Lancer will make his mark on a meta like that, really. That's pretty much the biggest changes we've had, pretty much what you would expect. We've had our biggest heroes that were too dominant and the patch been nerfed, and we've had a few underdogs, mainly melee heroes, kind of see a buff across the board. Ranged supports as well that were doing really, really well or have been nerfed, mainly Ringmaster. He's also seen a huge nerf, albeit they were looking at data for him, no doubt, because he wasn't really being played at all at TI because he wasn't pickable. He's been nerfed all around the board. His K-back can now be dispelled. Cash range has been reduced on Tame the Beast. Wheel of Wonder have seen some nerfed, and he's had some base changes. Thing of note here I think is really interesting is that Tame the Beast still has the same damage it did before, which I think is huge. The ability still does a huge amount of damage, and it's just kind of crazy. As you would expect, it's predominantly been heroes that were doing really well before have been slightly nerfed or big time nerfed, and heroes that weren't doing as well have been buffed. The biggest changes on the patch, no matter where you look at it, really are all the way at the top. It's much more about those Brazier, Wraithband, and Null Talisman changes and Solar Crest changes than it is about any one individual hero, I think. But it's very evident that, as you would have expected from a D patch, a post-TI patch, they're nerfing range cores in particular. They're actually buffing quite a few melee cores, which is very interesting. And supports that were doing way too well before have had themselves act a little bit in the right direction. What you would expect from a balance change patch. So the meta of the patch is probably going to pretty much remain roughly the same as it was before. I don't think we're going to see too many big changes in how people are going to play. We're probably still going to have a very aggressive teamfight heavy meta, but it is going to be interesting to see, especially coming into post 25-minute mid game, see how all of these heroes who were being way too tanky before are going to fare now that Brazier in particular no longer has the same power it used to have. On the whole, we should find ourselves in a patch that is not too much unlike the last one, although with range cores being a little bit less strong than they used to be, which is a good thing. Hopefully not nearly as much Gleipnir and just Wind Ranger in every game as there used to be. I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you had a great time. As always, I would appreciate a thumbs up and a follow here on my channel big time. And of course, if you want to do any kind of talking about Dota, if you want to converse about Dota, if you want to write a comment, or if you just want to talk about the patch, please by all means do so in the comments. I would love to see your input on the patch as well, and I'll try and get back to you as fast as I can. I hope you all are going to enjoy 737D. I'm excited to play more of it myself. Let's see what is in store for us until we have 738 land on our doorstep and see what Kess will play like. It will be very interesting to see what direction Dota will end up going in. Thanks for watching. Good luck in your games, guys. Cheers.